In a Rome covered by the grey of a morning solemn, something invisible but powerful floated in the air. The windows of the apostolic palace were half open, but no breeze came in. The bells of St. Peter's Square pealed the silence before time, as if they knew that it wasn't just any day. Inside a discreet, remote room of the bustle lay He-Man, who for years had guided millions. Francis, the Pope who had conquered hearts with his simplicity, was in his last moments. Surrounded by cardinals, doctors and prayers, he made a gesture with the hand, almost imperceptible. Nobody I was expecting a request so intimate. It didn't ask for speeches or crowds. It didn't demand words, finals. He just mumbled a name. Baltazar. Baltazar was not just a dog. He was the partner who had continued for years, even in silence, even in the shadows. A black, floppy-eared rescue dog, more than a decade ago in one night rainy season near Castel Gandolfo. Since then, it has become part of the environment without pomp or circumstance, recognitions, officials. Francisco considered a friend, a symbol of what was his own vision of the world: humility, tenderness, and presence. There was who they said that, in the sleepless nights, the Pope spoke with he in a low voice, as if Baltazar understood every word. That tomorrow, when listening his name in lips of the Holy Father, one of the attendees understood that it wasn't just a farewell. It was a reunion necessary, a circle that would be closed not with theology, but with love. The message was sent with urgency. From the Vatican, a car left towards Castel Gandolfo. In her seat rear, Baltazar slept, oblivious to the human urgency, but with a calm that seemed guess the purpose of the trip. The caretaker of the convent where he lived since Francisco fell ill, it wrapped on a brown blanket, the same with the one the Pope used to cover it during the winter. Upon reaching the gates from the Vatican, the guards, for the first time in years, they opened. I walked past a dog, as if it were a head of state. The silent corridors, the centuries-old frescoes, the marble cold, everything seemed like a witness to something that transcended logic. It was a silent procession, with measured steps, as if the time would have passed, slowed down just for that moment. Already, have you experienced something like this? Stay a little more and share this story with who also needs believe in it, invisible. Meanwhile, in the room of the Pope, the air became denser. Breaths were slow and the pace of the monitors seemed to keep pace with the prayers that were whispered. Francisco did not speak, but his eyes open. They expected something more than the death. And when Baltazar entered, nothing was needed. No voices, no orders, no tears. He just walked slowly towards her bed, sat down with dignity and support his snout in the edge of the bed. The Pope barely turned the face, and in an effort that exhausted the little that he remained, raised a trembling hand. He placed it on the head of his friend, a tiny gesture, but with the weight of a lifetime. At that moment, many of those present turned away the look, not out of modesty, but because they were witnessing something sacred. The silence that filled the room wasn't empty. It was a kind of silence that held memory, gratitude, and a love that didn't ask for anything. Explanation. Baltazar did not bark. He did not move. Tail. He didn't moan. He just stood still, breathing next to the man who had been his world. The doctors, accustomed to the science, they did not know as intervene in that moment. One of the cardinals closest to the Pope knelt beside the animal, moved. It's also liturgy, he whispered. And it was, a farewell without incense, no choirs, but full of the essential. Faith in the form of company. The affection you don't need translation. Life lived with authenticity until the last breath. If this moment touched you the soul, perhaps it is time to follow this page. Hours passed, as if they were minutes. No one dared to break the moment. Every movement in the room was careful, reverent, as if they were afraid of disturbing a connection that transcended. The Pope remained with the eyes half closed, and although his body was weak, his expression had softened. Baltazar, in not a moment, diverted the look of his face. He seemed to know. And in some point of dawn, when the moon hid behind the domes and only the moon remained, lights dimly lit, Francisco exhaled slowly, almost imperceptible. A nurse noticed the monitor and then raised the view without say word. Nobody shouted, nobody cried, because when love is so deep, nor the death dares to interrupt his peace. The body of the Pope was prepared with delicacy, following the established rites. But during that process, Baltazar was not removed. He remained there, like a living statue of loyalty. Every gesture of the medical staff, every handkerchief folded, every candle lit, seemed done with more careful when noticing the animal's presence. It was as if everyone understood that the dog was no longer just a pet. It was a witness to something eternal. When they finally covered his body with a sheet white, Baltazar sat up, sniffed the air once, and then lay down at the foot of the bed, like a sentinel who does not abandon his position. So it remained, for hours, until the darling it began to get light. The bells of St. Peter's Square rang again, this time not by tradition, but by heart. The news spread quickly. Pope Francis had passed away. But what many didn't know immediately, it was that in that same room was left a living soul that still held the farewell. Baltazar was not removed, he was not, they tried, and when a young priest, new in the Holy See, approached to take him with softness, was his own oldest cardinal, who it stopped with the hand. Not yet, he knows. When leave? And he had reason. Baltazar kept looking towards the window, where the light from the tomorrow. She entered timidly, as if waiting for a sign, as if knew that his mission it was not over yet. The image of Baltazar was captured by one of the Vatican photographers who, without intention to break the privacy of the moment, he felt he duty to record something that transcended the informative. The photo went around the world in a matter of hours. A black dog, serene, by the bed of the man most loved by millions. On social networks, the image not needed words. "This, it is also faith," he wrote. Someone, "I have never seen anything so human," he commented. Another. And while the newscasts were filled with tributes, biographies and memories of Francis in the streets, thousands of people hugged their animals with more tenderness. There was something in that story that struck a chord, something that reminded everyone that true love is sometimes silent and forleged. With he passed from the days, the Holy See organized the ceremony's officers. They arrived leaders, religious leaders, pilgrims from all over the world. But in middle of the solemnity, they asked for Baltazar. Where was there? Who it would take care now? Would I return to Castel Gandolfo? There was no need for a statement. The decision was taken with the same spirit of the Pope, simple, fair, loving. A community of sisters who lived in a nearby convent offered to take him in. They were women Francisco used to visit secretly, sharing mates and laughter away from the flashes. There, they said, Baltazar would have peace. There, he would have who he will be remembered not only as the Pope's dog, but as the guardian of a soul. The public farewell was multitudinous, but intimate in spirit. While thousands they passed in front of the coffin in the basilica, the cameras never showed Baltazar. Not out of carelessness, but out of respect. He didn't need to be there, had lived his farewell, more real and profound than any rite. Meanwhile, in the convent, the sisters, they said that in the early mornings the dog would wake up alone and walk to an old house, cassock that now he used it as a bed and lay down on it, sighing. It's like hearing a voice, he said, Sister Inez caressing him back. And nobody I doubted that, because Baltazar didn't seem sad, just waiting. An Argentine journalist close to Bergoglio since his days in Buenos Aires, it was he first in publishing a chronicle that touched millions. The last wish of the Pope was not a symbolic act, he wrote, was a lesson. It reminded us that in the end, we do not carry titles, nor positions, nor theologies. We carry affections, And sometimes those affections, they have tails and legs. The text was translated into more than 20 languages. Schools, parishes, and even television programs, they started talking of the bond between Francis and Balthazar as if it were a modern parable, a reminder of what essential. And in that gesture, the whole world found consolation. Because when a pope dies, they light up prayers. But when a dog refuses to leave, souls are ignited. In the convent, Balthazar's routine became in a kind of unofficial liturgy. At 6 o'clock in the morning, he sat in front of the iron gate, looking towards the east as if waiting for the sunrise next to someone. At 9, walked to the small chapel and lay down right next to the pew where Francisco used to kneel on his visits. And in the afternoon, he settled under the olive of the patio, where the wind, it seemed, whisper stories ancient. The sisters, at first, thought they were coincidences, but with time, they understood that Balthazar still remembered, that his soul in some way still walked next to his friends. One day, Sister Clara found a box old woman that Francisco had left on one of his visits. Inside were letters, a worn wooden rosary, and a photo, him young, with a puppy that looked like much to Balthazar. And on the back, a handwritten note read, "God's love also manifests itself in those who don't speak, but look at you with truth." That phrase became a motto in the convent. She was hanged in the entrance, embroidered in tablecloths, recited as a prayer, and not because it was the Pope, but because everyone in that place, they understood that it was a truth that transcends creeds. Balthazar was not a "I remember." It was a presence, a living echo of what was and what still is. With he passed of the overtime, letters arrived from all over the world addressed to Balthazar. Some, they were simple children's drawings. Others included photographs of pets with messages like, "Thank you for teaching us to love like this." Sisters, they started hitting some in the walls of the dining room, and very soon that space was transformed in a little sanctuary. Visitors passing by the convent asked meet him, pet him, take a picture. But Balthazar never behaved like an attraction. He greeted silently, he moved his tail slightly, and then returned to his favorite corner, as if it knew its place in the history was not that of a star, but that of a witness. Autumn afternoon, while the leaves crunched under the feet of the sisters, Balthazar stared at the sky for long minutes. Sister Inez, who was sweeping the portico, came over and sat next to him. "What, you feel too?" "Right," he whispered. I didn't expect answer, but Balthazar supported his head on his lap. It was as if understood everything without saying anything. That night, Inez wrote in his diary, "Today I felt that the darling was closer, not by praying more, but by being next to someone already it grazed with the soul." And so, day after day, the convent became not only a home, but in a space where the sacred came down to the everyday, where love had no name, but memory. Balthazar began to age with a serene dignity. His gait became slower, your fur showed silver threads, and his naps grew longer. But something in his gaze remained intact, that light that seemed carry within a story too big to be told. Sisters, they took care of him tenderly, giving it the same foods that the Pope used to offer him. Bread dipped in milk, pieces of fruit, and repeating phrases that they made the move ears, like, "Shall we go for a walk?" or "Win Jorge." They knew he didn't understand the words, but yes, the love behind them. And every time he lay under the image of St. Francis in the chapel seemed clearer than his history also. It was written in the heavens. An Italian journalist, who had followed the Pope's life for years, published a book titled Baltazar, the Last Witness. The book was not a religious tale, nor a traditional biography. It was an intimate chronicle of how a simple link could contain reflection of an entire life. "In times of noise," he wrote, "the Pope chose the silence of a dog as his last company, and in that silence told us more than 1,000 speeches could express." The book became an unexpected phenomenon, not because of marketing, but because on each page people found consolation, truth, and a question that many avoided: with who would you like to be there in your last breath? The fame of the book led to some publishers propose to adapt the history to film, but the Vatican, with respect, urged caution. "This is not a fable," said one of the spokespersons. "It is the real life of a being who loved and was loved in silence." However, something more powerful than any campaign began to emerge. In several cities of the world, people organized reading meetings, passages from the book, sharing stories with their animals, and pray together. In schools, teachers they used the story as a tool to talk about compassion. In hospitals were planned the images of Baltazar as a symbol of comfort, and in nursing homes, the elderly, with eyes wet, they murmured, "That dog understood everything." Baltazar, meanwhile, continued living with the same calm. He didn't need to know that his image had given the around the world. I didn't know about covers or translations or tributes. I only knew that every day had a sunny corner in a patio, a blanket that smelled like his friend, and soft hands that they petted him at the end of the afternoon. He didn't bark, he didn't beg, he just was. And in that being became a master of patience, of presence, of love. As if his mission hadn't finished yet, as if he was waiting for something more, something that only his heart, and perhaps God, could name. An especially cold winter arrived in Rome. The sisters, they placed additional blankets in every corner of the convent, and Baltazar was installed next to a soft heater, with his bed next to a photograph framed, Francisco caressing her the head. Despite his age, remained alert, with that dignity that is not learned, it is only embodied. One morning, Sister Clara found awake, staring the door. "Anyone, is it coming?" he joked, but Baltazar didn't react like others. Times, he remained in silence, as if hearing something that no one else could hear. That one night, he didn't want to eat. He didn't complain either. He just stayed in his sight, as if it were ready. The morning following, it was clear and cold. The sun slanted through the stained glass, casting colors on the stone floor. The sisters approached one by one, in silence. Baltazar was no longer breathing. His body was in peace, with his face supported in the old cassock that had been his coat. There were no tears, only a mixture of longing and reverence, as if they all knew that he also had chosen her moment. Sister Agnes, in a soft voice, said, "He left when wanted, like a guardian who, seeing that his mission finished, delivery the key and rest." And in that moment, Rome became quiet again in silence. But it wasn't a silence of loss. It was a silence of gratitude. Balthazar's body was buried in a garden of the convent, right at the foot of the olive tree where I used to lie in the afternoons. There were no official ceremony or long speeches, just a prayer. In a low voice, a shovel shared between trembling hands and many flowers placed carefully. On the land freshly removed, a simple plate. It said, "Baltazar, faithful friend, witness of love," nothing more. And it was not necessary. Because those who were passing by that corner, they knew that there lay not just an animal, but a story that had touched millions of hearts. A symbol of what Pope Francis had believed always, that God also dwells in its simple, in its silent, in that which does not seek applause. With time, that one corner of the garden became a place of pilgrimage. Families, they arrived with their children, couples with their pets, elderly people with walking sticks and souvenirs. They left flowers, photos, letters. Some prayed, others they just sat down in silence. And all, without exception, they felt that something sacred was floating in the air. The sisters never charged for entry, they never put up bars or signs, because they knew that Balthazar didn't belong to them alone. He belonged to the world, to that part of the world that still believes in the love that needs no language, in the loyalty that asks for nothing in return, in the tenderness that remains even when everything is gone. Every anniversary of the Francisco's death, the convent bells ring 3 times at 6 in the tomorrow. It is not a Vatican protocol, nor an imposition of the Church. It is a gesture born of the heart of the sisters and maintained by will collective. In those mornings, someone always leaves bread with milk by the olive tree. It's never missing. It's never announced. It just appears. As if Baltazar still would walk around, sniffing the air, remembering the footsteps of his friend. And although his body he is no longer here, his presence continues molding the silence of the place. A silence that doesn't hurt, but accompanies. A silence that says, here there was love. The stories about Baltazar have reached far-flung corners, from indigenous communities in Latin America to Buddhist temples in Asia. Many come in he a transversal symbol of compassion. Some it compare with San Roque, others with he spirit of the wolf of Francis of Assisi. But what is most moving is that no one disputes his role. There is no theological debate nor ideological division. Everyone agrees in which Baltazar represented something the world needs to remember, that love, when it is genuine, is not preached. It is lived. And it remains, in looks, in gestures, in the memory of a dog who simply refused to leave. In an interview years afterwards, Sister Clara said something that remained recorded in many hearts. The Holy Father taught the world with words. Baltazar. It did with silence. That phrase became in mural, in song, in prayer. It was repeated in homilies, printed on souvenir cards, and embroidered on altar cloths. Not because of romanticism, but because it expressed a truth that everyone felt but few they knew say. Because sometimes the soul communicates better without noise, and that was what they both left behind. A conversation between different beings, yet deeply connected by love, a lesson that needs no plot, just memory. Baltazar had no titles. He was not canonized. He will not be included in history books as the protagonist, but his history, it lives on, not in shop windows, but in everyday gestures, in who adopts an abandoned animal, in who accompanies a sick person without expecting gratitude, who chooses to stay when everyone has already left. Because, in the end, that was his message. Did not miracles, he did not speak, he did not write, he just was. And in that being there changed more lives than can be counted. Not because out a hero, but because he was true. And in this world, few things are true. There are so many. The convent where she lived her last years now has a small memorial room. It is not a museum. It is a warm space, with photos, a blanket, a replica of the cassock, and a recording of a homily of the Pope speaking about the humility. There is no admission charge. There is no guides. Just a notebook where visitors can leave your thoughts. And the pages are full, from simple messages like "Thank you, Baltazar," to deep confessions from people who rediscovered the faith, the forgiveness or tenderness thanks to that story. One day, a girl wrote in clumsy handwriting, "Now I know that God also has legs." Sisters didn't correct anything. They just smiled. This part excites you? Leave a comment. Sometimes a shared phrase comes just in time. Many they ask why the Pope chose a dog as his last companion. Some they look for symbolism, others mystical answers. But those who really knew Francisco know that the answer is much simpler. Because I understood that in the closeness of an animal, there are no masks, no expectations, only love. Because when one leaves this world, one doesn't need words, nor grand farewells, it needs presence. And Baltazar was that pure presence, a soul that didn't do nothing to be. And in that being, accompanied the most influential man of his time, reminding him and reminding us that what matters most is never what we say, but what we are. Baltazar has been drawn in school murals, immortalized in ceramic statues, and mentioned in sermons by pastors of various religions. And yet, All of that seems small compared to what he really left behind. A persistent whisper in the awareness of those who love without noise. In a time of shouts and urgency, it was calm. In a world of egos and demonstrations, he was humility, and that's why his history does not dissipate, because in the deep, we all long for that purity, that connection that doesn't depend on achievements or promises, just to be, to look, to accompany. Like him, it did. Pope Francis used to say that the gospel is preached more with the feet than with the mouth. You have to walk with he another, to be with he another, suffer with he another. And that was what Baltazar embodied. He never spoke, but he walked with him until the end. He never argued, but remained when silence was more necessary. His legacy, like that of Francis, is not in a pedestal. It is in every person who chooses simple love over appearance. In every soul that understands, there are presences that, even without words, they say everything. If you've made it this far, it means you felt something. Help us take this story further. Like or share it. In the quiet nights in Rome, when he grazes the ancient walls from the Vatican, there are who they say that something feels different in the air. It's not sadness nor nostalgia. It's a soft sensation, like I remember that it's not completely gone. As if the Balthazar's footsteps still they toured the hallways silently, watching, caring, waiting. Sisters, when closing the convent each night, look toward his garden and greet with a gesture, not out of habit but out of faith, because they believe with all their souls that true love never goes away. It just changes form. Today, years afterwards, Balthazar is still alive, in small gestures, in a shared bread, in a timely caress, in the decision not to abandon someone suffers. His history, it no longer belongs only to the Pope, nor to the convent, nor not even to the church. It belongs to the world, to whom they believe that the spiritual also can have legs, a tail, and eyes brilliant, to whom they understand that sometimes the most divine thing comes silently. He sits by your side and accompanies you until the end. And when it's all over, he leaves in your soul a certainty. What is important, what is eternal, is love. On a special occasion, during a private visit to the convent, a young Argentine priest stopped in front of Balthazar's tomb. He said nothing. He just took off his hat, his skull cap, bent down and left over there a little wooden crucifix. As he stood up, he murmured, "Thanks for remembering us what it means to stay." Nobody you asked his name, nobody it photographed, but the sisters they remembered it as one of those moments where the sacred manifests itself without need for spectacle. A small moment, like so many in the life of Balthazar, who without wanting him became eternal. Ending this story is not closing it, because Weil is someone who loves in silence, who accompanies without asking for anything, that he stays even if everyone has left. Balthazar will live on, not in statues or books, but in the way we treat others, in the decision to be present, in the last breath of a pope, and in he first. Of many who learned that love is not shouted, it is shown. In that corner of the world, between the olive tree and the cassock old, continue beating something that neither he time nor the death they can turn off. Thanks for staying until the end. If this story left something in you, share it with who you need to remember that true love never goes away.